Testing, check, check. Welcome to the Ninja Robot Studio LLC stream, where I play video games and VR experiences and talk through them from a UX designer's perspective. Game development has a heavy and direct influence on XR development, so it makes sense that we would study game design to give us a greater understanding of how to design quality immersive experiences. And the plan is to have all of you in the chat participate, and that way we can learn together. There are a lot of classes out there already on UX design and UX processes, and more classes are coming out around designing for XR. So think of this as kind of an unofficial and less academic and less expensive university labs class for UX for XR. We're going to use critical thinking in our design analysis, and my goal is to help you gain experience in this process as you participate in the chat. And if you check out the widgets on my Twitch page under the About section, you'll see a section called Rose, Thorn, Bud. And we'll be using this method each session to think through the games I play. And it's experimental, and I'll learn and iterate on the format as I go and as you guys give me feedback. And let me just quickly share my screen so that I can show the people that are watching this later on YouTube. What I'm talking about on my Twitch page. So on the About page, you can see that I've got this Rose, Thorn, Bud list, and this is talking through the simple method for critically thinking about experiences. You can use it for anything really that you're thinking about retrospectively. It could be a project, it could be an experience, it could be how you're working with others, it could be anything. So this is the method that we're going to use. It's less formal, but it is a good way of quickly getting to the meat of what's going on with an experience. It's different than a heuristic evaluation, which is a much more in-depth evaluation, professional evaluation, that you probably know more if you're from a UX design background. In the traditional software and application world, as a heuristics evaluation following Nielsen Norman's heuristics for usability. That takes a lot more time and a lot more effort, and so we will not be doing that here. That's something you should honestly be getting paid to do. That this is just a quick method that still gets to the meat of the issues. And we will also be going through, besides the UX for XR best practices that I write, we will also be using The Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent as a kind of a textbook for studying game design. My experience has been mostly in the serious games, so training for consequences, safety. If you respond a certain way, this is going to happen. And how do we respond appropriately to keep everyone safe? Those are the kinds of games that I'm used to designing. So I've gotten questions on entertainment side of gaming, and it's something that I want to understand myself. So that's another reason that I'm doing this stream, is so that I can also learn, we can learn together about the entertainment gaming side of things. And I have learned that in my own experience that gaming, even on the side that I work on, gaming has greatly influenced and taught me a lot about how to design these quality immersive experiences. So it's a perfectly logical step to study entertainment games in 2D and in VR to help us learn how to design quality experiences in XR. So if you have the funds and you only have one book to buy this year, I would recommend this book, The Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent. And we will be going through this one as well. If you want to support the cause, I have games cost money, and to keep the games coming and the stream going, I need money for games, and there's only so much money I have to spend on games. So if you want to support the cause, and if you want to support the cause of all of the UX best practices and educational videos that I put out regularly, you can do so by multiple ways. You can become a patron on Patreon, and that will support all of the work, or you can buy merch. I have hoodies, t-shirts. I've ordered samples of them, and they are doing well. For the samples that I've bought, if you have issues with them, you can let me know and I will work on how to make that better. Now I have a follow-up from last week. If it will load. I don't know why it's not loading. It was fine a while ago. Sometimes I ask myself why I'm in technology. Okay. So last week we played Card Hunter, and I remember at the end of the game I was afraid to leave the game because it didn't say it was autosaving, and it hadn't said anything about autosaving, and I was afraid to leave the game because I didn't want to lose 2 hours worth of play. So I did leave the game and I went back in, and yes, it did autosave. It didn't say it was autosaving, but it did. So what would be an improvement would be to make it very clear that the game is autosaving. And there was also, as we remember, Rose Thorn Bud, and we will go through that a little more later, that some of the buds that would come out of it are next steps or things to follow up on. And one of the things that I followed up on was the card behavior, because it felt like it was inconsistent. And it turns out that it was slightly inconsistent. I don't know the reasoning for that yet. For when you made a movement, you selected the square after the card enlarges on the screen, and you can go back and check the video. It is on demand. You can check it. What I'm talking about, it was a tabletop game, and you moved just like you would in Dungeons and Dragons or anything. You move certain number of squares, and you pick which square you go to, and so forth. Well, this one, you have this. Your skills are played by cards, and so there was an inconsistent behavior in how that worked when you selected something. So when you were moving, you selected the square after the card enlarges to show you to say that you've played the card. And whereas when you're attacking, you select the target and then the card enlarges to act like you played. So it was a little bit of an inconsistency, so I would get confused as to whether or not I had actually selected the card, because I was talking as we were playing, so I would forget. But I don't know if there's a reasoning behind what they did there, but it was something that was inconsistent and threw me off. So that was just a follow-up to verify that that is what was actually happening. So then, if that's the case, a bud would be to... well, we don't know why they did that, but a bud would be to I guess follow up, because of course we don't know, look into reasoning behind inconsistency. That would be a bud. And so now, before we get started on our game for this week, I want to quickly, and do this at the beginning of every stream, as just a reminder, these are the things that we're going to be thinking about as we go through the game. The pillars of gaming UX. And I've got these from The Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent. My mic stand keeps falling. And we'll just quickly go through those as a reminder before, so that we know what to think about while we're in the game. And so Celia has standard heuristics, which is what, if you're in UX, you would be used to these usability heuristics, or pillars, and what she calls them, for your standard 2D apps, your website, software, things like that. And those are very similar to what you would see in the Nielsen-Norman heuristics of usability. Signs and feedback, clarity, form follows function, consistency, minimum workload, error prevention and recovery, and flexibility. However, she talks about them from the game standpoint because it is slightly different, but not really. You think about it from how gameplay works, and it's also written in a way that it makes more sense to developers, because UX professionals like to use big words that nobody else knows the meaning of. So this is simplifying the words into common everyday language that your team will understand. Signs and feedback are all of the visual, audio, and haptic cues that inform about what's going on in the game, or that encourage players to execute a specific action and give a clear reaction to the system to the player's actions. So that's like your quest cues, your little quest signs above the NPCs, your wayfinding to say this is where you go to find the quest objective. Those are signs. And then the feedback is, how does the game respond? That can be through audio, haptics, visual, to say, yes, the game has responded. If there aren't clear signs and feedback, then that can be where you get into accidentally, like a simple example of that would be on your desktop. If your software doesn't act like it's responding and launching, when you click on the icon to launch that software, you may click it a bunch of times, and then you'll end up with 10 screens of the same application because you kept clicking and you weren't getting the feedback. So kind of the same thing there. And all of the features and the possible interactions in a game should have signs and feedback associated with them, because they guide the players throughout the experience to help them know how to continue. And then clarity is all of those signs and feedback should be clear and should be perceptible to avoid player confusion. Like what I was mentioning earlier, it was not clear at all that the game was auto-saving. There may not have been any kind of sign or feedback to tell me that it was auto-saving, because I never saw anything. I never noticed anything, at least. So that's where clarity comes in as well, if it was there at all. And typography, color contrast, font usage, all of these things, UI design, all of these things work together to enable that clarity or hinder that clarity. And for example, all of these things, the signs, feedback, the UI, everything should work together to enable you to quickly prioritize your information in a situation. Like if you're in a combat situation in a game, you need a certain type of information. You need to be able to respond quickly, or else you might die or kill your whole party or whatever. and have to start over at a certain point. So you want to be able to quickly prioritize information that is relevant at the time, and what's relevant, what's not relevant, and you want these signs and feedback to be perceptible but not intrusive to the game. So popping up a screen or a window in the middle of combat is not, first of all, it's going to be very, very annoying to the player, and it's going to intrude in what they're trying to do, which is survive. So you don't want it to be intrusive. And then form follows function. The form of an item, character, icon, and so forth should accurately convey its function, design for affordance. So that is going back to the Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. A chair affords sitting because of how it's designed, doorknob affords turning, things like that. So a table affords you putting things on the table. All of these things, the form lets you know what the function is. And so you want that in your game as well. You want your design to be such a way that it is clear what will happen when someone interacts with that thing. And consistency is all of these signs, all of the feedback, all the visual cues, icons, colors, things like that should interface, menu, overall conventions, those things should be consistent. Like, for example, your NPCs should have a certain look or feel versus player characters, like in a lot of MMOs, massively multiplayer online games. The NPCs are a certain color nameplate above their head, the name of what they are or who they are, whereas the player characters can be a completely different color nameplate versus your enemies can have a red nameplate, so forth. It's a clear differentiator of things, and it's consistent. And you also want them to be consistent with the mental models of regional gaming, for example. So I give this example pretty regularly with the Sony. The controller has symbols instead of letters. And once I started thinking about that, I saw that it was pretty brilliant, since there's no language barrier for shapes, no language barrier for symbols, whereas ABC, those are alphanumeric, don't even English letters, and so you would have to translate if you're from another country, another region with a different alphabet. So that adds on a level of complexity, and we'll talk about that in a minute with your workload. But in different regions, for example, I bought a Vita from Japan, so that's the only reason I know this, is that on the regional in Japan, the O and the X are flipped. So in America, the X is what you use to select things, and the O is what you use to go back or return. And in Japan, it's switched. So the X is to go back and the O is to select. And I think that goes along with a language thing. The circle is what they use for correct, whereas I can't remember, but I think it has something to do with language. So consistency in regions, you want to design things to where they are the mental model of the region that you're going in. That is important, especially for international games. And that's also for your actual games. So MMOs, things behave a certain way. Like I said, enemies have certain nameplates above their heads to say that they are an enemy, versus NPCs these are mental models that people have, but there's also a consistency. Welcome, me miss. Welcome to the show. Where are you from? And then as far as minimum workload goes, that is on the cognitive side and on the physical side. So cognitive load talks about your attention and your memory. All of your attention. Oh, welcome, Sweden. Nice to see you here. Cognitive load is talking about your attention and your memory. So how much actual mental load is taken in. You want to minimize the tasks that aren't part of the core experience. So things you shouldn't be focusing so much on how to use the controls. You want to use your mental load to actually play the game and not be distracted by the UI, the interactions, the controls, things like that. So you want to minimize the workload of what they're actually thinking about so they can focus on the actual game, the actual thing that you're wanting them to do. And as far as physical load, that's like clicks. How cumbersome is this interaction to do? Again, as long as it's not part of the game mechanic, you want it to be minimized, and you want things to be, especially during the onboarding part of a game, you want the distractions to be minimized. You want things to not be cumbersome. You want them to just be able to learn how to play the game so that they can get in there quickly and get started and start enjoying the game. The interactions should not be overly complicated unless it's part of the challenge. And I mentioned this one a lot in Final Fantasy XIV. If there's a boss mechanic where with the controller, you expect the controller, if you move the joystick a certain way, you go that direction. That's what's expected. But with this boss mechanic, if it puts the debuff on you or the condition on you called confuse, then it's going to make the joystick act differently. So you're not going in the direction that the button that you push the joystick, and that's a game mechanic. And that would be, it becomes very, very cumbersome to get where you're trying to go, but that is part of the game. You are confused, and so it makes it harder to get where you're going, because in real life, if you were confused, that would be how it went. So that is part of the game, but that is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is the normal interactions of the game, how they move around, how they play with things. Should not be cumbersome. Should be a minimized effort to let them do what they need to do. And then error prevention and recovery is around you anticipating what errors the players could make and then prevent them from happening. Like what I was talking about earlier on the follow-up with the autosave. I was afraid to leave the game that we were playing last week because I didn't know what was going to happen. It didn't say it was saving. I didn't see an option to save. And so I didn't know that if I was going to lose the last 2 hours of play or not. And I just had to take the risk, and I closed the game, opened it back up to see if the stuff was still there, and yes, it was. You want to anticipate those things and let people know very clearly that what's going to happen. So make it clear that you can save. Make it clear that you're not going to lose all of your stuff when you leave the game. If you don't have an autosave, make it clear when they try to leave the game, hey, you're about to lose all your stuff. Do you want to save? Give them a way to recover from that whenever applicable. And then flexibility is around the more customizable the game is in terms of control, mapping, font size, things like that. The better it is, the more accessible it is for more players. People with visual impairments, people with hearing impairments, people with disabilities, people with color blindness. You want to be able to change all of those things and customize those things to make it easier for them to play. And also language, difficulty levels. Some people just want to play for the story and for a little bit of excitement, and other people want to play do or die. But there are different preferences, so if you can give them the flexibility and that level of play, then do so, because that's going to make it more accessible to more people. And then one thing that games have that the normal traditional apps, software, things like that don't have is this second pillar called engageability. Because again, we are talking about entertainment, so how do we get them to stay with us? They're not doing something that is necessary. They're doing this for simple entertainment and enjoyment. So we have this pillar. What's motivating them to continue playing this game? And so we have motivation. What's the level of competence and autonomy that they have? What kind of rewards are they getting? What are their motives to play this game? And emotion is, how does the game feel? What's the presence like? What are the surprises? Are there any surprises? There are 3 C's that it talk about in Celia Hodent's book: control, camera, and character. It's the polish of the game. These are the things that enable discovery and surprises. And then game flow implies the level of challenge or difficulty curve that you have throughout the game. What's the pacing? What's the learning curve? How are they learning? Are they learning by doing? Those are the things that make a game engageable or not. And again, this book is The Gamer's Brain by Celia Hodent. Highly recommend it if you have the funds. And now let's talk about the game that we're going to play today. The game we're playing today is called Demeo. It's a VR game. It is multiplayer, but we're just going to do solo play today. And it is a tabletop game, kind of like the themes that we've been doing so far are tabletop RPG games. And this is now, those were in 2D desktop, now we're switching to VR. And this is available on Steam. I think it's cross-platform. I think it might be on the Quest as well. Not sure, but there's also a 2D version that is coming out if it's not out already. But it is a different kind of game. It is, I'll just read a little about it. Adventurers, it's time to unite. A dark force has taken over the underworld in the RPG dungeon crawler Demeo, and it's a world you're not likely to survive alone. It's available on Steam. It is cross-platform, so you can play with people on the PC and so forth. Up to 4 players will soon be available for traditional gaming play outside of VR. And you can cross-play. And if you're a solo player, you can still have a party of players. Of characters. You're just playing all of them yourself. And there are currently 3 modules out that you can play, 3 adventures. And I believe they're adding more regularly. So give me a moment to switch over to VR. So technology, yay. Give me a sec. Miss, did you have any questions so far? Okay, that's no problem. It will be on demand later, so you'll be able to hear it later or watch it later. One thing that I have mentioned in best practices is that when you're getting someone acclimated to a new world, you want to give them the control over when to start and stop the game. So when I loaded this game, you don't want to throw them into an experience right away, and you don't want to start immediately playing the game or any content in the game, because they may not have the headset on yet. They could still be getting situated, getting the controller set up. I'm doing right now. Hopefully the hands are detected correctly. Yes. So you don't want to just start the experience. You want them to have control over when they start and stop it. But when I started this game, there was some narrative that started right away, and I completely missed it. I don't know what it said. I think it was some kind of background, like setting the mood for the type of adventures you're playing in this game, but I completely missed it because I didn't even have my headset on yet. So I didn't hear it, and I didn't see what was being shown. So that is one of the best practices that you do want to follow, is let them start and stop the experience so they don't miss anything. Because now I have no idea of how I would go back and replay that, because it's not the option to do that I can see. So let them have control over that. And are you still able to see okay? And hear okay? Are you a developer? That's cool. I'm a UX designer. I don't know enough about developing. I can cause trouble for the developers, but I don't know enough about development to actually do it for a living. So I'm here from the experience side of things. And you're able to hear okay? Okay, cool. So here we have our starting scene, and this is what I'm talking about. Let them control the start. You've got your menu here so that you can choose the type of game you want to play and so forth, and see your progress if you have any if you've played before. And it lets you know your rewards for progressing through it. So that's giving you some motivation for how you would, why would you want to continue. If you get to a certain amount of experience, you're going to get rewards. And if I click on them, nothing's happening, so I can't really tell what they are. So that's something you might want to let them see what they are. Right now, I'm not sure. It's a cool setting. It's kind of driving you into that feel of these are your tabletop games that a lot of people used to play in their parents' basements or their own basements. They gather their friends around a table to play. This is setting that mood, which is cool. And simulating hands, but it does have the little laser on there, so telling me, does not tell me how to select things. So if I were very, very brand new to VR, I wouldn't know what to do. So you might want to consider that. If for someone who is absolutely brand new to VR, they might need to remember which button to use. That's that, and you would want to have a little reminder there. And it is a good idea to, this is the side menu where you select submenu options. It's a good idea to always have labels accompanying your text, because especially internationally, icons can mean different things to different people. So for example, this one looks like trophies, but it's not trophies, it's items. So it's not a huge deal because I'm clicking on it and I'm seeing what it is. And here you've got an icon with a label on each one, which is good. But it would be beneficial to people so that that's going back into that cognitive load of minimizing your workload. Is if you accompany an icon with a label, then they don't have to play. There's this old card game in America called Memory, where you have to flip the cards and try to memorize what's on each one, and then you start challenging yourself to find the right cards, pair them up. It's called Memory. I don't know how popular that game is even anymore, because I'm showing my age. But by not accompanying these icons with labels, you're kind of making them play memory, trying to remember what's under each of these menus until they learn what the icons mean. And there are different people with different levels of, they call themselves technical, non-technical. There are people that have a higher difficulty to learn how to interact with things. Studying the people and how they interact with things and where they have trouble helps us come up with these best practices. We are going to do tutorial. I've done the tutorial before. I think it does auto play it, or it starts out with it if the first time you ever play the game, but I've already played the game before, so I have to find it in the menu to replay it. And this is where memory comes in. Is I have to remember it's down here under help. Now I can play the tutorial, or I can scroll through this. Generally consists of 3 levels. On the first 2, you have to find some type of key and exit the gate. On the last level, you must defeat a sinister boss who carries a valuable item. And let's go through the tutorial to learn how to play this game.
We'll start with the basics. Point at the OK button with your hands and press the index trigger to continue.
Now it's telling you to use the trigger.
First, you need to know how to move around in the catacombs. We'll start with one-handed movement.
One thing that I also say is to try to avoid sticking things to the HUD, and this is what I mean by sticking things to the HUD. When I move my head, that thing's following me around, and that can become very annoying. It would be better if, yes, you want it spatial like this, you want it placed out in space, but if I turn my head, just put it over the table, it doesn't have to follow me. It can just be in space in front of me. Because I may be wanting to look at something over here like her, but now this thing's blocking me and I can't see her. So we're learning how to move.
Press and hold the grip button on your right or left controller.
Pressing the grip button.
Keep the button pressed and move your hand to drag yourself around.
This is the drag type locomotion. And if you check out my best practices site, which is in the links in the about section on the Twitch, I do talk about locomotion, and you can do a search on the website for drag world, and that will give you best practices on this type of locomotion. It is not a recommended type of locomotion.
We'll try moving around with both hands.
Because it can make people sick. It makes me sick all the time, especially if you don't have mitigations in place for minimizing sickness, which this game does not. It talks about that in that article. That if you are going to use this type of locomotion, there are some things that you can do to try to make it less of a risk for people to get sick. Right now we're moving around with both hands.
Let's try to zoom in and out.
Holding both grip buttons. Well, I have to say okay first.
Press and hold both grip buttons. While holding both buttons, move your hands apart to zoom in, and put them together to zoom out. Good. Now for the last step, I'll teleport you back some. Just keep looking forward and press OK.
Appreciate that they're warning me that they're going to move me, because if you do that without any kind of warning, that can be disorienting, and it's going to make me sick, or it's going to make me uneasy, queasy, regardless. But at least they're warning me first. Oh, and they did a fade in and fade out, which mitigated that. So that's good. Press and hold both grip buttons on your controllers. Keep rotating. So rotating is something that definitely can make people sick.
Rotating and zooming to find
and I talk about
is vital to this game.
I don't know if I don't remember if I actually talked about that in the articles, but this is called when you move side to side. That's called strafing. And when you're strafing, and it's easy, it's fine to do that. It's less, so for people who are prone with motion sickness, even doing that in a 2D game is going to make them sick. But there are things that you can do to mitigate that and try to keep it from being as bad. In VR, it's especially so because you're immersed in it. And so it's the whole world moving instead of just 2D screen with the frame. And so when you're moving side to side, that's a less natural movement, because when we move somewhere in the real world, we're looking where we're going, hopefully, so that we don't run into stuff. And so motion going forward and backward is what we're good at. And so when we ride in a car or something and we look out the window and the world's strafing, going sideways because this is the way we're looking, we're more likely to get car sick than if we're looking ahead at the road ahead of us. And so that is the same in VR. If you're moving the world, this is going to increase that uneasiness, because there's a mismatch in what's happening with your body and what's happening with what you're seeing. There's a mismatch going on. And that mismatch is what increases that motion sickness. Okay, excellent. Dragging, rotating, and zooming to find a good viewing angle is vital to this game. And I've mentioned it before, but whenever there's words in a different color in quest dialogue or anything, those are keywords that they use. This is a pattern, a design pattern, that these are keywords that they use to help the people remember what they need to focus on at a certain point.
Okay, time to play. Move around until you have a good view of your champion, and then we'll continue deeper into the crypt.
And the wayfinding is cool because it's giving you, hey, over here, and that's highlighting. This is called wayfinding to help you know where to go in the game. And this is another thing to think about as far as game design, is the physical design and the physical headset. So if you have a game that is a tabletop game where people are looking down, that act of looking down is, so think about your cell phone, and when you're holding your cell phone and it goes down, 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 and your neck goes down, down, after a while it starts hurting. That is emphasized even more when you're wearing a headset. So when you're designing experiences and you're designing space, you want to minimize how much they have to look down. You want them to be able to keep their neck straight and look forward, because these headsets are heavy. This one is heavy. The Vive Cosmos is very front heavy. And so even holding my neck straight, my neck's getting tired, my head's getting tired. So if I'm looking down, it's going to happen even faster. And so I'm going to not be able to play this game for very long because I'm already getting physically tired from being in the headset. Adding on looking down is going to be even worse. So one of the benefits, and probably one of the reasons that they did this drag world locomotion, was so that you could do this and you could change it to where, okay, I'm not looking down. Now I can look up and I can still see what I need to at this particular moment.
Let's look at how to move your champion
What
around.
is next?
The highlighted tiles show how far you can move. Pick up your champion by pointing at it and pressing and holding the index trigger.
I also like how it has your health above on your nameplate so you can see how much health you have and who the player is. So when you're doing multiplayer, you can see each other. Holding the trigger, not the grab. Okay.
Drop your champion on this tile.
Because grab is for locomotion. Okay.
Releasing the index trigger. Great. Each move with your champion counts as one action and costs one action point. Interacting with certain objects in the levels, such as doors, will move your champion to it and count as an action. Place your champion on the door to open it. The circle on the ground shows where your champion will land. Good job. Since that was your second action, you're now out of action points. You have 2 action points each turn. You can check how many you have left on your right wrist.
Right, left, right, left. And it has the turns there as well. This is actually a nice way of keeping the interface not intrusive. It follows you around and you can just look at it like you would your watch, which is nice.
Now it's the enemy's turn. It is the enemy's turn. Enemies can deal
It is
damage
time.
to your champion when they get close and attack. Hover over a champion or enemy to display their health. You can see that you took 1 damage from that rat. Time for some payback. Attack the rat by placing your champion on top of it. Pick up and throw the die with your index trigger. Good job. The die has 3 different faces. A sword means a hit. A double sword means a critical hit. And a skull means you've missed. Nice. Let's move on. Open the next door to continue.
One of the challenges here is you see how much I'm having to raise my arm to move things around. Some way this thing is going to be physically cumbersome. Because right now I'm having to raise my arm because of the angle of the inside-out tracking of the controller on the physical headset. Versus if I change it to where...
Oh, look at that. An enemy is hiding in the shadows.
If I change it to where I can see more, then I'm looking down, and that's going to mean that my headset is causing more neck strain. So whichever way you go with this type of tabletop game design is going to cause physical strain of some kind. So the challenge is, how can you design, and I don't fully know that answer, it would come with experimentation. How would you design a game like this so that it's not causing that physical strain when you're looking down with a heavy headset, or you're having to move your arms to compensate for the inside-out tracking on the headset with the controllers, so forth? How would you design that?
You have been poisoned from its attack. Whenever you are hit by a status effect, an icon will appear above your champion. Attack the enemy now.
And it has a red highlight over the enemy when I put my control over it. When I put it over it.
Remember,
it's highlighting which one's going to get
picking
attacked.
it up using the index trigger, and then release as you throw. Not quite enough to defeat it. Have another go. Well done. But you're getting low on health. We should find a way to restore it. Glowing markers indicate a POI, points of interest, often worth investigating. Move over here to reveal these points of interest. This is a chest. It contains useful cards.
And a lot of physical, cumbersome action, moving the table around so you can get a good angle. And again, the more I move this around, the higher the exposure to that weird motion that's going to make me sick as I play the game, and my neck's hurting already.
Open the chest by dropping your champion on top of it. There you go. Now turn your wrist to see. Take a closer look at your new card. The description tells you what it does.
I like this interaction as well. We've been talking over the last few weeks of how do we design a tabletop card game in VR, because I know if you go back and look at the other videos, you'll see how they handle the cards and so forth. How would we design this in VR so that the cards aren't stuck to your HUD and they're not in the way? But here we can see if we flip our hand, like we would in real life holding a card deck, we can see our cards. The question is, how close or far do you get with these? And there's an article on my website and video. I do have video out about it now, about eye strain in VR and what you can do to reduce the amount of eye strain when you're reading text and looking at finer details of designs in VR. Eye strain is a thing to think about as well. This is placed at kind of the minimum distance for eye strain. This is a lot closer. So you want things that are closer to you to take less time to read for sure, because the more you look at these smaller things with the smaller font size and so forth, your eye's trying to focus on it, it's going to cause more eye strain because this is blurry and my eyes are trying to compensate for that blurriness. The reason it's blurry for me is because of interpupillary distance. And that's the physical design of the headset, is that there is a limit to how far apart you can move the lenses to adjust for your interpupillary distance. Women have a smaller interpupillary distance. I have a smaller interpupillary distance because I'm like in between adult and child size. I'm small. So most headsets are made for adult males. And so when you have, the smaller you are, the less the physical headset is going to be able to adjust down to your interpupillary distance, which is going to increase your risk of eye strain, which reduces the amount of time that you can actually spend in a headset without getting eye strain, headaches, things like that. That's something that we have to think about for, especially if we're trying to get more and more children into these headsets, is the headsets aren't built physically for children or for small adults either. So we can't spend that much time in these as they are designed right now. Especially the physical weight of the headsets takes a bigger toll on smaller smaller you are. Take a look at your new card. The description tells you what it does. So it's a healing potion, restores a fair amount of health, and there's a heart with a 7. I guess that means it does 7 health.
At the top of the card tells you how many actions are needed to play it.
Okay. Hero.
Grab the card with your index trigger.
It highlights green.
Drop the card on your
and has a nice outline. So I'm taking it in and out of my deck, holding down my trigger, not letting go because I don't want to play it accidentally. And I'm having issues with inside-out tracking on the Cosmos. That is a hardware issue. And so it is, so there's an X saying where it's going. Because I could heal myself, or I guess I could heal someone else. And it's highlighting the target in red as the person that I'm going to be healing.
Good. That should keep you alive a bit longer, I hope.
That's what I'm talking about. Feedback, signs and feedback. There's a lot of signs and feedback going on there, and that's a good thing to help you know what's going to happen when you let go.
A new enemy has spawned. Since you only have one action point left, you can't reach it this time.
I also apologize. When I'm in my headset, I can't see the chat. So if I'm not responding, that's why. I just can't see the chat. One action point left, so I can't reach
Open the next chest instead.
enemy.
Maybe there's something inside that you can use. Good. Now it's the enemy.
Something new.
There you go. Now turn your wrist to see your card hand and your new card. Zap is a replenishable card. You can use it once, and then it will refresh for your next turn.
There's a little sign down here at the bottom that's like a recycle sign, and the hand tracking, inside out hand tracking on the Cosmos is not the greatest, so my hands keep moving. I'm not physically moving, and that is also disorienting problem with the actual headset. Damages and stuns your foe, 1 turn cooldown, so I have to wait. So if I get a crit, it's 3 damage. If I just do a normal roll, it's 1 damage. And if you look at the mental models that are being used on other card games that we've played so far, yes, the physical design of the card is slightly different, but a lot of the mental models are still there. Got your limits, got your damage, how often you can play it, things like that. Those are, depending on the mechanics, there's still a good mental model there for that.
Pick up Zap and use it on the enemy. Drop the card on the goblin. Pick up and throw the die by using the index trigger. Your zap stunned the goblin. Now, use your second action point to do a melee attack. Perfect. When you vanquish enemies, you gain card energy. Check your card meter on your champion or in your card hand. Defeating those enemies was enough to fill up the card meter, giving you a new class card. I'll join in with my champion now, just to give you a hand. A champion is downed when their health reaches 0.
Saying death in 3. I'm assuming that's 3 turns, but it's very clear that their death is imminent by this skull over their head. That's a good design.
Revive an ally by placing your champion on top of them.
You look healthier already.
Allies are crucial for surviving each adventure. Take good care of them. Healing fountains will replenish the health of you and your allies. It might be helpful in the upcoming fight. See the exit over there? You need a key to unlock it. Every game of Demeo generally consists of 3 levels. On the first 2, you must find a specific item to be able to exit the gate. On the last level, you must defeat a sinister boss that carries a valuable token or key. Once defeated, your adventure is complete. Alright, enough with the hand-holding. Let's see what you've learned. This enemy holds the key. Defeat it, and the key is yours.
So it's pretty clear which one's holding the key because he's got. Ugh. So jittering's a problem with the Cosmos. This doesn't happen when I have the Quest plugged in on Oculus Link cable. Just on the Cosmos. So it's not the game that's doing it, it's the
Defeat the enemy to obtain the key.
I like that they have a clear indicator of who the key holder is by having the key floating above their head. It's my turn. I want to heal. Then.
Now, what will the fiends do?
I am ready.
Play these cards. I like also the animation that they have when they play. I'm gonna use that. Ugh. Hand tracking would be so annoying.
I call lightning.
You must destroy all enemies near the exit before you can leave. It's the monster scene.
I am ready. The heavens condemn you.
One does a lot of damage. And it's got a 3x3 AoE. I don't want to hurt my friend here.
Nicely done. You're ready to face whatever the fifth world might throw at you. Will you prove strong enough to defeat the corrupted souls awaiting during the journey? I guess we'll see. Finish the tutorial by placing your champion on the exit.
Okay. So the so multiplayer is quick play, single player is skirmish. Well, each hero in the party in this single player mode. So I had one going, but my head is starting to hurt. I would like to continue this. Maybe we can do this at another time, but I'm going to take the headset off because my head is starting to hurt. Fixing my audio settings again. Okay. My hands are floating in space. So let's go ahead and do a rose thorn bud on this. Okay, so again, like I was saying earlier, the rose thorn bud is a quick method that you can use to go through what went well, what didn't, what you liked, what you didn't like about anything, an experience, working together with other people, a project, lots of things. So this is what we're using to go through the games that I play. So what was something that went well? What was a highlight? What did you like? I liked the basement game table setup. And I liked the animated minis, the tabletop minis. And I liked that these are the roses that we're doing right now. I liked that you could still roll the dice, even though it's a digital game. That's something that people who play tabletop games really like, is the ability to still use the dice, roll the dice. Even though the computer's doing the math for them, that's fine, but the actual ability to roll the dice is something that people like to have. There's just something about being able to roll dice. And what else? I said the animated tabletop minis. I liked that there was the DM playing with me. An AI DM, but still an AI. Still a DM. I liked the signs and feedback. Feedback were clear. And music sets a good mysterious danger mood. It's like impending danger. I liked how they handled the card deck. The cards held in hand. And you see them by flipping. And I liked the turn tracker on hand. It's on the right hand. So the UI is not cluttering the space. It's not getting in the way of what you're trying to do. It's on your hands. It's how the way they've handled it is pretty nice. It goes back to that. It's not obtrusive. It's not getting in the way of what you're trying to do. It's there to help, and it's not hindering, which is very good design. The game overall is very good. I like it. I enjoy it. I do play it with friends. I just can't play it for very long. That would be a Thorn. Can't play for long because of physical strain. Like, that's actual physical strain. Headset, it's heavy. Heavy looking down on table. But however, the method of locomotion, I call it the drag world locomotion, increases feeling of sickness. And then also adds to physical strain of moving table around to get good views. So it's a physically tiring game for me. Again, that might have something to do with my size. I don't know if other people have that issue with the Cosmos being so heavy. It is for me. I have the only headset that I can actually wear physically for an extended period of time is the PlayStation VR headset. And it's there in the background. You can see it, that white headset. Very, very lightweight. And it is a tethered headset. It has its own little VR processor that you plug into the PlayStation that does all the processing power. So instead of all of that processing power being in the headset, and it also does not have inside-out tracking. It has a camera that you use for tracking. So that extra hardware you needed for inside-out tracking is not in that headset. So it actually is a very lightweight headset, and the physical design of it is also very comfortable. So I've played for 6 hours, lost track of time playing VR, playing Catan VR in that headset. And we might do that sometime. If I can get the PlayStation to work with this stream, we might do that. But that's the only one that I can play for any extended amount of time. All of the other headsets start hurting physically after a certain amount of time. I have a Quest. That one hurts my face after a certain amount of time because it's heavy and it's just putting all the weight on your face, even with a modded head strap. And the Cosmos is heavy overall. And yes, it does have a Halo strap, which is one of the reasons I bought it, was because of the Halo strap, because that's what my PlayStation VR has, and it's super comfortable. But the added on weight of the actual inside out tracking and all of that didn't help anything. It actually made it heavier. And the design of the Halo is not where it goes. You need the headset to go down here underneath this round part of your head, underneath the round part of your head, because that helps take the weight off of your face and off of your head. But the design of the Cosmos doesn't allow for that, because if you put that back part far enough down, then your eyepiece is too high up and you can't see. So the physical design of your headset really matters for long-term use. And the Cosmos, let me grab it real quick, I'll show you. So you can see with the PlayStation, if you can see that, there's a big slant to the actual Halo. So that means that physical design of it is that these line up like your eyes do physically. So your eyes are still going to be inside here when this is beneath the crown, whereas with the Cosmos, the slant's not high enough. So if you slant it, that means that the eyes are going up, so that You can't actually see into the headset if this is at a comfortable enough angle for long-term wear. I don't know if I had that in the camera. Sorry if I didn't. So let's see, what was something else? Physical strain of the game was the biggest thing for me. Mechanics and everything were nice. That this goes to show that you have to think about all aspects, not just the actual gameplay, but you've got to think about how this is physically affecting the player. And that's where I get into, there are videos and articles that I have on the website about physical factors, about external factors, about locomotion. All of those things are really important to as well, not just the actual game, the actual gameplay and ease of gameplay. Because the gameplay itself is easy. The interactions are easy in and of themselves. The problem is the physical part of it. And I'm pretty sure that their goal was not physical exercise, because that's not what tabletop gaming is all about. That would be interesting if you could figure that one out. I guess it would be VR LARPing, which is live action role playing. So if you can do that, sure, but that's not what this one is. So physical strain shouldn't be a factor in this game, but it is. So what are some buds, opportunities for how we could make it better? So I can't play long because of physical strain, I would say, because I don't have an answer to how you would design it, but taking into, it would have to take into account comfortable, and we'll go through that in a second. So explore ways to design the tabletop experience in a new way to keep people from experiencing the physical strain. So yes, they're making it like a tabletop game, which makes sense. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Because that's how we play it in the real world. But in the real world, when we're playing, we don't have this big heavy headset on, and we would just physically walk around and move around the space and lean over to look. We wouldn't be moving the world around. So how do we think about it differently to make it so that it's not causing physical strain, but you're still able to move around and look around and see your different objects and that? And I would say, because there's a lot of occlusion happening and you have to move and look around to see things, and it's actually making me think about moss. And I don't have that pattern up on the website yet. I am working on a pattern library for how other people solve problems, and that's actually a good one. Like, see how moss handles. Moss is another VR experience. See how moss handles obscured, like obstructed views of the characters, because they have a very nice solution to that. It keeps you from having to do all of that physical strain of moving around and looking around. It actually keeps you still in place, and the world around you is the board game, and they do handle it very well. So those go together. You see how moss handles obstructive views of characters, because that's going to help with that physical strain. And I don't have a video or an example of that. That's something I plan on adding to my pattern library. The headset, I mean, we can't do anything right now. It's not something we can control about the weight of the headset that the people are going to be using, but we can control how we design our game and how we can mitigate that in our game. And so that's where we want to explore these ways to design it to keep that strain down. And that's looking at see, I'm going to switch these around. So yes, you want to keep mental models, but then there are also times when, okay, we've got this whole different world now, this virtual world now with all kinds of possibilities. What can we think outside the box to do to take our traditional tabletop gaming experience? Sorry. This mic stand is very annoying. It's constantly falling. So, what can we do to think outside of that normal box of how we're used to playing them? And they're starting to do that with the animated minis. And yes, you can move around the table now a lot easier than you'd be able to in real life, but that moving around the table is actually pretty physically cumbersome, and especially if you're using inside out tracking on your headset, because you have to keep your hands in a certain view of the headset so that the trackers pick up the controller movement, so you're actually moving less naturally than you would normally, because your arms are out further, especially if you have short arms like me. So you have to move them out further so that the hand tracker, inside out hand tracking, picks it up. So it's even more of a strain for small people. And let's see, explore other types of handling, explore mitigations, or add mitigations. I mean, at the very least, add mitigations to Drag World locomotion, because there are some very simple mitigations you can add. They're not going to take away that risk of sickness. They are going to minimize it, because even with the mitigations in place, depending on how susceptible you are to sickness, it's still gonna happen. It's just going to decrease the risk and severity. And then if we can think of, I don't know why that decided to go with a completely different style of explore other types of other ways to move around or see the full table, or at least the section that you need at the time, because you don't need to see the full table all the time, just certain parts of it where you are. And let's see, so since we're already playing XR, this is immediately related. So we don't have to do this exercise of translating it to XR. But I can show you real quick what I was talking about with these follow-ups on exploring ways. So to learn more about locomotion and so forth, I'm waiting for my website to load. It's being slow. My internet's being slow. So this is the UX for XR toolkit, and it has videos, articles on best practices. I've got articles here on how I transitioned into the space of UX for XR, and how I learned about it, and I'm sharing all my learnings with you. So that's what this website is. That's what I'm doing here with the toolkit, videos and articles and patterns of how other people have solved these problems in the past that we can look at and see, okay, how do we solve this problem ourselves with this game? what are some ideas? What's some inspiration? That's what I'm doing here. And so some of the things that we could learn from Demeo here is, I love the gameplay. I love the game. It's very cool. The problem is that I just can't play it for very long, like I said, because of that physical strain and that movement. If I stay in too long, it's gonna ruin my day. I know it will. So I have to get out before it does it, or I will regret it. So, physical factors, motion sickness, head comfort zone, because when you're looking down, that's what. So a section to read to learn more about what we were looking at in Demeo is the human factors, and that's this section. If you look at by category, learn the basics of human factors. It's the physical, the animation, the locomotion. How are things? Locomotion is eye strain. That was another thing. How do you place things? They did a good job of their placement of objects and items in their world. I didn't have any problem with that. The question and the fact that they had less text on those things that were closer up made it a lot less strain on your eyes. So I think they did okay on that. And the limitation is in the actual headset. And again, interpupillary distance of your eyes is a physical factor of the headset that they don't have control over. What can we do to mitigate it, though? Placing things further out into space and making sure our font sizes and our design of our fonts. These things I talk about in the Make Things Easy to Read and Prevent Eye Strain section. And again, like I was saying, what can we do to mitigate the physical aspects, physical problems with your ergonomics, your neck strain, your motion sickness? Those are under the human factors section of the website, or you can just search for motion sickness. And never tried to search for neck strain to see if that comes up with anything, but head comfort zones, fatigue, things like that are where you can learn more about those physical aspects of games that a lot of people don't think about when they're designing VR experiences. That still affects things. And eye strain, again, label sizing, how comfortable viewing distances, those things affect where you would place your UI elements, your cards, and so forth. And again, I don't think that I didn't have any huge problems with their UI design or anything. Pretty easy to learn. I didn't really have a problem with it. They did a good job. I'm surprised at how good of a job they did on this game. But there are things to learn from it, and here's where you can learn more about those aspects. And I also have videos as well, videos and articles about them. And then we were talking about locomotion, Drag World. So Drag World is the type of locomotion that they used in this game. Sorry if the mic stand is making extra noise as I move it. It keeps falling. I need a new mic stand. Drag World, it has its pros and cons, but it has some workarounds and of how you can do what you can do to mitigate those issues. And I have done research on this myself with people, with humans, and I did determine that I didn't recommend Drag World as a primary method of locomotion, but there are some use cases where it is needed, and if you find yourself in that use case, then there are still some things you can do to mitigate that risk of sickness. Comfort options, for example. I didn't notice any comfort options. Maybe there were some, but I just didn't notice them. Maybe if I dig into game settings, there might be something in there, but I did find physically that laser pointer type of interaction of grabbing a portion of the world with one hand and moving it is less physically cumbersome than the type that they were using, which is both grip buttons. They're using the more cumbersome type than like Google Earth has a type of drag world locomotion, and what they do with it is that you can see that they're blurring out the periphery, so that says what is one of the biggest problems with motion sickness is when your periphery things are moving in your periphery. So if you blur out the periphery so that they don't see that movement in the periphery, and it's just what's in front of you, because like I said earlier, we're used to looking at things and looking where we're going. And when we look at things to the side and they're going this way to the side, then that is what makes us sick. That's one of the bigger things that makes us sick. So Google Earth has a good example of how they do drag world to mitigate that risk. And I recommend their method over the type of method that is being used in Demeo. From a physical strain standpoint and a mitigation of, I still get sick in this type, but it takes longer for me to get sick in this type than in the other. So I could play the game longer, except for the problem with the physical weight of the headset. But I can, hopefully the weight of the headsets will go down over time. Right now they're still heavy. But that is all I have for today. I thank you for watching. And again, if you like what you're seeing and you want these to continue, and need funds for the games, you can support me on, and if you want to support these efforts on writing these best practices and creating all of this content, teaching people how to design better experiences in XR, then you can become a patron and support me on Patreon, or buy merch. But if you don't have the funds to do that, which is okay, like, subscribe, share, and follow. Those are ways that you can help as well. Thanks again. Thanks for watching. And I won't be here next week because I have a webinar that I'm doing next week, but I'll be back the week after that. And the plan is to play another VR game called, I think it's called Cards and Tankards or something like that. It's a VR game, but that's the plan for next time, and I will see you then. Thanks for watching.